Next up, we have our first work session item this evening. That's the food service update, and that's going to be Ms. Kenton and Mr. Smith.
Sharon? Easy. Hi. I printed you guys paper copies, even though the printer is so wonderful. I don't know what it is with those. There's one for you too, Dr. Bellwood. And it's on the screen too. It's probably prettier on the screen than the paper, but just in case you want to read the information later, of course you can always look it up on your computer. But I just wanted to give you a quick update because I haven't talked to you all yet this year, so sorry about that. We've been very busy serving kids. It's been great. It's been a really good school year. Our participation is awesome. We've served over 800,000 meals so far this year. And this is actually just through February because we are not through March yet. So this doesn't include March numbers yet. We are currently sitting at $2.5 million in revenues and sales. We recently just received some more supply chain funds, which has really helped. We were sitting in a negative position until we received those funds. So we've talked about several times at several meetings, feeding in the CEP program at the identified student percentage that we are at. We were looking at potentially being in a negative into a deficit without some additional funding. So we just found out that we were going to be receiving this extra funding. So that's going to help us greatly. This funding also helps us to be able to provide fresher fruits and vegetables for the kids. So we've really been able to amp up the food in the kitchens, especially here recently, which is awesome. Also, things are coming more into season now. So you're going to see a lot more fruits and veggies out that the kids, and they love that. And that is a very seasonal thing. You know, you see it at the beginning of the school year and then you start to see it now again. So our vendors are able to provide more fresh items and you're going to see that. And I always post on social media. I try to tag the school district so that everybody can see what the kids are able to choose from. Not that they always pick the most colorful items, but it's all out there and looks really pretty on the serving line. So currently we're sitting around 32,000 excess, which is really good for being able to provide the free meals to all. We're really excited that hopefully we'll be able to finish the year that way in a positive position. Buck and I have been talking about this spend down plan that we're on. We've been on it for 2 school years now. So again, during COVID, we received a lot of extra funding. And so we have a lot in our cafeteria fund, which Rob was talking about earlier. We have a separate fund. So when food service departments have excess funds that are what BDOE considers too high, right now, we currently have about 5 months excess in our operating fund. And they have a calculation that they put together and they tell you once you're over 3 months in excess in operating that you have to come up with a plan to spend that money down. So we've been doing that the last 2 school years. We've been replacing equipment, of course, milk coolers, any type of refrigeration that's gone down. We've been doing some painting where the kids have kind of destroyed certain places with their little, picking at the walls and things like that. So we've done a lot of, not renovating, but repainting and things like that. We've replaced some steamers, some convection ovens, some warmers and things of that nature. I'm not reading directly from this, so let me not get off track. We've replaced a lot of small wares and personal protective equipment as well. Recently, we added a walk-in freezer at Skyline Middle School, and that is really nice because we've been able to have extra storage. A lot of times with USDA commodities, we will get charged a storage bill if we can't bring all those items in at one time. So now we actually have a place to bring those items in, and we're not getting hit with those storage bills because we have a place to store them. And then whenever we need them, Leo or myself will go move the food, or sometimes managers will come to Skyline Middle School and pick these up. So Mr. Helmick helped me find a place where we could put a freezer, and that's been really helpful. This summer, we're actually on our spend down plan. BDOE kind of has me estimate different projects that we kind of foresee that we'd like to work on, and different things that I think we may have to spend money on, and then they give me what I need to kind of budget for, and we can change it based on the needs. If something greater happens or something like that, we can edit the spend down plan. This summer, we'd like to do 3, I would say, kind of major projects for food service. They're at A.S. Rhodes, E. Wilson, and Hilda J. Barber. All 3 of those serving lines are very old. They're just not conducive for the amount of meals that we are now serving in the CEP program. They all have different challenges, mainly spatial issues, also just flow of the way the students come through the serving line, and then also their age. Some of them have been broken, we have food on ice, things of that nature. So we put them on the VDOE spend down plan, and just this week we got approval from VDOE to spend the money on the projects. So I've gotten the quotes and everything. I will be bringing them to the next meeting to explain everything about those. Does anyone have questions about the spend down plan through VDOE? Okay. Here recently, we have really been working at Warren County High School, and I'm just really excited about it. It looks so nice there. If you ever get a chance to visit or walk through, or if you want to come meet with me and walk in there, I know Dr. Funk and I had met to look at Second Chance Breakfast, but we did kind of a little facelift there here recently. We updated their electronic menu boards with the help of technology, and we repainted their bulkhead and revamped their pizza area and just made it look really fresh for the kids. They love it. They're so excited. We bought all new smallwares, new like pans for their pizza line. If you can see there, they just look really contemporary. All new stainless steel serving pans and things like that. New milk coolers that are just updated. They kind of had some maroon looking older milk coolers, and a couple of them had functional problems here and there. So we replaced those, and we had like I said, we had the bulkhead repainted and a couple of things touched up. We put some LED lights around, and looks really, really nice there. So if you want to go take a tour, let me know.
That pizza area looks really cool.
It's fun. It's really fun. The kids are really excited. And just on the next page, the print off is not good, but you can see here where it had a maroon bulkhead, and it just kind of looked a little bit dark. And then we replaced it. We repainted it. We also got the cooler personalized with the Warren County High School logo over it. We just redid the whole place. It just looks really nice and open. There's not a whole lot of lighting. Everything's kind of like these lights, so that really brightened the space up, made it look bigger, and the kids were really excited. We did it over a couple professional days, and they were like, "Oh, it's so awesome in here." And then again, with the help of technology, we actually put electronic menu boards in all the elementary schools. So here's just 2 pictures with Hilda and E. Wilson. Again, the kids get so excited over new things. We are also having some of the elementary schools painted right now. We recently had Rusty Jeffries touched up. We're getting ready to have E. Wilson touched up as well, but we did have the electronic menu boards put in all the elementary schools, and some really nice marketing through Sodexo put onto the screens, and they're really fun. The kids are, "Oh, we have TVs." They're so excited. There's no noise on them, and it's all about their food, but they just love it. So they're really nice. And then the last thing I have is just an update for you on our summer feeding. So last year, we really struggled with summer feeding. We were not allowed to do bulk meals like we had been allowed to do previously. We were only allowed to serve students who were in summer school, and we were allowed to have them as open sites, but we could only feed students who would come in and eat on site. And that was really difficult because people from Blue Mountain or Chester Gap or things of that nature, they weren't just going to come down to eat breakfast and then go back home and then come down to eat lunch. And so just in February, I was on a call with USDA, and they just changed the definition of rural because they saw what happened to a majority of the country that could no longer do bulk feeding. And I think they heard from a lot of people, including me. We were venting to the state, but then the state was taking that up. They have redefined rural, and they have really expanded the definition and the geographical area. And so now most of our area, except like a little tiny bit near Annis Roads and a little tiny bit near Warren County High School, that's not technically considered, but we are able to do our bulk food distribution again. So we have been working with transportation, and I just applied for a $22,000 grant through No Kid Hungry to be able to pay the transportation employees who will be working so that they don't have to foot the bill. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to get the grant. They're very good for funding certain things for us. We already got one grant from No Kid Hungry to help fund some of our second chance breakfast this year. So fingers crossed, but we are on the spend down plan, and that money is also allowable to help pay the transportation workers. So if we don't get the grant, we can use our excess balance as well to fund the program. But this will really help be able to allow our employees who want to work this summer to be able to work, and we will be able to do the bulk distribution again, the same that we were doing 2 summers ago and throughout COVID pandemic. So that's all I have. Any questions? Thank you.
Next up this evening, we have Mr. Smith talking about the Virginia Freedom of Information Act basics.
Good evening. I'd like to actually thank Nicole for her presentation here and going over the spend down and all the things that she's doing at the food service. It is amazing, and it's fun, and it's a rewarding job to be able to feed folks. There's lots of things that we do, and that's one of the things that I think is probably one of the great things you do to help someone learn is to fill their stomachs. This evening, I'd just like to go over do a small presentation. I have Andrew Selman, who is our one of our school board attorneys, will be joining us here through a Google Meet, and I like to. His role will be if we need to. Is there any type of questions and those type of things, since he's kind of definitely is part of this team. I have a slide presentation here. You have it on your board docs. The Virginia Freedom of Information Act is the law that governs access by citizens of Virginia's business trading within the Commonwealth and representatives of the media with circulation within Virginia to public records and or meetings or public bodies as defined by the Act. FOIA provides that with some specific exemptions and exceptions, all meetings of public bodies shall be open to the public, and all public records, documents, and so forth are available for public inspections. All public meetings and records are presumed open unless an exemption is properly invoked. Warren County Public Schools, this is the County of Warren, this is an any for complies with the FOIA Act. All records and agendas for school board meetings are contained on Board Docs platform on the Warren County Public Schools website. So FOIA allows transparency basically with local government, with citizenry. And so a public record or a document and those type of things are what would be the product of a FOIA request. So it is an actual document. It is not a document that you would create after the fact. It's a document that currently exists. Documents could be in a form of a contract, could be in a form of an email, or could be in a form where it's an actual document, a physical document, a public record. So a public record is any writing or recording, regardless of whether it's on paper or electronic, even audio or video to some degree can fit into this area. And that document would be prepared by or owned by in possession of the public body, such as Warren County Public Schools. All public records are presumed to be open and may only be withheld if there's a specific statutory exemption that applies. There are lots of exemptions that you have for FOIAs. The last I looked, there's probably maybe almost 100 or so. They can be very confusing. So some of the most common exemptions that we sort of run into, one would be we would run into as a school division. One would be student records, and that would be protected under FERPA. And those would be records, scholastic records, and those type of things that would pertain to the student. Matters related to personnel, those that would be in the personnel folder, those that would relate to anything that would be confidential for a particular employee, attorney-client privilege information. That would be an exemption, and that would be with the body themselves, the public body, and their relationship or communication back and forth with their legal counsel. And there's an exemption, and it is the attorney-client privilege exemption that can be applied there. There are certain type of personal contact information. Let's say, for example, and here's kind of a gray area, it sort of falls in there with this, is let's say that as a parent, I sign up for a newsletter of some sort, or something that I want sent to my house from the school. And that sole purpose is for me to receive that particular newsletter. So that information in itself would most likely be exempt under this personal contact information. Emails and those type of things, if someone's just sending emails in through dialogue and so forth, wouldn't necessarily be covered under this exemption. There's security system footage. So perhaps some of our footage that would be in the hallways, if there's an altercation, if there's an incident, whatever it may be, not necessarily something physical in nature, someone could have slipped or fell or those type of things. So some of the security system footage has an exemption because a lot of times they may have other students that also may be walking down the hall that could be identified. So sometimes those type of camera footages would fall under, could also fall under student records. Security procedures and protocols. Some of those may be, as an example, as we fall under our crisis management plan. And let's say, for example, within our crisis management, there may be some type of information that if it was released publicly, if someone wanted to do harm to us, then harm to our school division or to anyone within that division, as part of our crisis management plan, if we release that information, then it would give access to our security protocols and procedures. So that would be. The vendor information, a lot of times this comes down to, like, if there's a particular trade secret of some sort or a formula or something that maybe one particular company has, that it could be also some software type of programming and those type of things. Maybe something with like our email or Outlook program. So those are some of the major ones. Like I said, there's many of those, and those are some of the major ones that we have. As far as how necessarily does the FOIA actually work? Normally, we would have someone request a FOIA, and normally a FOIA starts, unfortunately, a lot of times it starts very broad. And you try to work with that person to narrow that FOIA down so that as you're trying to gather the information, you can at least capture that information. If not, the email threads never stop. They continue to go on. So someone requests. There is a form that they can fill out, and it's a form that Doug had Doug pulls all of our emails and a lot of the stuff that we do with FOIA requests. There is a form you'll see on a few of the bullet points down that can be filled out. I have accepted normally emails, and then if they normally call in, we use that particular form to write down their request. And that the third bullet point that we have here, that requesters should make their request on that particular form, but we have accepted emails. If someone calls in via telephone, we use that form to actually write down what they're requesting. And normally, sometimes, for example, Mr. Ballantyne will get some request as the clerk of the board and those type of things, and he will use this form to bring those down to us so that we can start that process. We take that particular form or that request, and then we start to look at that particular request and try to narrow it down. And then if it involves email, if it just involves like a document, like for example, a contract of some sort, that's a really simple one. And they normally aren't really simple, to be honest with you. They're normally very complex because in today's world, it seems like the email is the magical thing. And that has multiple threads as you go through an email. So we normally try to narrow that down. And then with emails, I get with Doug, and we go ahead and we start the collection of the information. The FOIA officer, after receiving the request, makes a determination on whether the requested records will be able to be provided. Some things are, you kind of cut it off at the pass per se, where they may be asking for some footage, some video footage of those type of things, and it's exempt under FOIA. And then some things you may look at saying we can start to run those emails. We respond, and we have within the first response within 5 days, and after the day after the request has been made, that to go ahead and to get the FOIA request completed. And those days are constituted as work days, business work days, so Saturday, Sundays do not apply, or if we have a holiday of some sort, or if school is, if the entire division is closed, not necessarily if students are here or not, but if administration is here, that would count as a day. If not, that would, if not, then that would not count against the 5 days. If it is a very large FOIA or something that we're just going to have a hard time staffing, we can apply, the state or the FOIA allows us a 7-day additional period of time on that FOIA request. The step 2 of that is that if we're unsure whether we can provide those documents, we normally seek legal counsel. What Doug and I normally try to do is to gather this information. We try to weed through as much as we can to identify which documents actually apply to this particular request. And then we normally send that to our attorney for review. And the step 3 that you have there, it says that if we are uncertain that they exist or if they may be located, efforts are made to find out whether they do exist. And perhaps just the other day, it wasn't necessarily well, technically it would be a FOIA when someone calls in or when someone writes in an email and they want this and that, but we did not have that particular document. But we at one time held that particular document. And the county actually now holds that particular document. So there the process would be either I would say that we had that, we no longer have that, and then have them go to seek the county and contact their person, as which they did, or I try to assist as much as I can physically to help them with the document. Step 4, our policy and all FOIA policies allows for fees to be charged for FOIA. Now, this has been in our policy for some time as a FOIA policy. However, we have not implemented the practice of this. And honestly, I can't sit here and I get discouraged when people say, well, historically, it's been like this since the beginning of time. Well, I don't know what it was like at the beginning of time, But I can tell you the time that I've spent here, what it's been like, and those type of things. And the increase of FOIA, especially the last year and a half, has been astronomical. There's probably about 4 of them on my desk now. I mean, sometimes when you start pulling emails, they can go anywhere from, a handful of documents up to 10 or 11,000 pages of documents. That doesn't necessarily mean once you start to do the research that each of those pages will actually relate specifically to the request specifically of what that request may be. However, you still have to put in like a terminology, something for the computer itself to pick up. So there could be some key words that you use that could be used in everyday language too that will start to collect. If you put in someone's name, perhaps if each day this person received like an attendance sheet or anything like that, it will start to pull that as well. So we narrow it down. That's kind of Doug's area, and he does a great job with that. I asked the county, actually I was working with the county yesterday to assist someone on actually the example that I just used of a document that we no longer had per se. The county said that they had it. And that was the first thing in, is that do you charge a fee for a FOIA? And I will work as many hours as I need to work. But the realization is on some of these FOIAs, just my time alone, not even including Doug's, outside the office can work anywhere from 15 to 25 hours in a week. So none of this money obviously is granted toward us, and that is not my intent in the statement and those type of things. But it is a very slow, extreme process, and staff is very limited on how many people can actually work and help through a FOIA. Step 5 just basically identifies that if we were to use or implement the policy as it is and go away from our practice and approach with the payment and so forth, if something was to exceed, if the search and those type were to exceed a certain amount, we would ask for a deposit. And we have to let those folks know up front what we would anticipate that actual amount of time to be. Some miscellaneous, should have here, okay. Some miscellaneous items. The first bullet point talks once again to the situation that I had with the county. Perhaps we once held the document, but not now. There are ways where that records and so forth can be inspected, and they can be inspected in there in the office. If someone says, I'd like to have a copy or I'd like to inspect the documents, one way for inspection is that once we get it and we get the information redacted, they can inspect it there at the office. Sometimes that happens perhaps with like video footage that perhaps may involve, well, definitely would involve their own child who perhaps may have been in an incident. And then school board staff are responsible for recording the date the request was received, verifying information, identification, and recording additional information in regards to the request. So normally, and I think it comes up that once we get that request, as I mentioned earlier, we follow back up with the communication outlining the amount of time and trying to specify exactly what the person is looking for. Sometimes folks, they cast the net, per se, and trying to gather a lot of information. And I appreciate the fact that they're looking for that, but it's most helpful when it can get down to something that's manageable to actually research. So someone now has sent it in. Someone has had a response. We have went through to find the information. We have sent it off to our legal team. And normally my advisement or our approach has been, if a exemption applies, to apply the exemption to that in order to be consistent on all FOIAs. That if one FOIA is done this way and one is done that way, then if there is inconsistency, then that creates problems. So that's what we speak with our attorney. So we get the information back. So the response is done within that 5 working days, or if there is 7 additional days that may be needed. As we mentioned earlier, the weekend or non-work days are not included. And the last bullet point there is if it's a complex or a very large FOIA request, then we normally invoke the 7-day extension. Now, on the FOIA responses themselves, you have the requested record. So a document would be called a record. So the requested records are being entirely withheld. Let's say a particular email that is attorney-client privilege and those type of things, that could fall into be an entire document. There's also the records, the requested records are being provided in part and then withheld in part. And this may be if you have a paper that has some redaction on it. So it's just possibly taking out a particular name of a student or something. It is being withheld in part because it's being redacted, but it's also being given to you in part other than what is redacted out. One could be that the records could not be found or they do not exist. Now, sometimes that's dependent upon what is the requester requesting, and then how we end up searching for those key terms, and that it either could not be found or by that particular search and so forth, it does not exist. And then if it's not practically possible to provide the records within that period of time, we normally work with that particular individual, and normally you identify what may be the reason of why. And a lot of times it's just volume of FOIA and staff to be able to pull that information. I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you may have in regards to this.
So, Mr. Smith, I just would like for the board to know, as far as he did mention his time and how much time he's spending outside of on weekends and after hours. You just finished a recent FOIA and you totaled your time, and what would the cost would have been for that FOIA that you completed?
If you
Now,
went,
that would have been just the cost for you. That didn't include the time that Doug spent researching and filling all this stuff. But what would that have been?
a little bit over 1,500.
So a lot of these, when you get, what is the most that you've looked at for some of the information that has had to be pulled for some of the FOIAs that we're receiving now?
Like number of documents on a
Yes.
particular folder, it could be 12,000.
What is the highest that you received? When you first got a FOIA back, when it came in, Doug pulled tape, who looked at it, or you looked at it?
Oh, the most original FOIA was over 1 million documents, or 1 million pages. A lot of that could actually be the 2. That's a huge number. That's a huge number. Some of that can be duplicates, can be redundant. It can be picking up a lot of things, but you actually have to start to work through that. But the original, the largest was almost 1 million.
And I thought, didn't we talk about how much time you spent pulling the one that?
Yeah, when the requests are broad, it can take me 3 to 5 days sometimes to process all the things. So if you were to take the 16 per quarter hour and multiply that, that's like $512 a day for just what I'm doing because we just got to jump through a couple different systems to get it just down to even PDFs that he can go through. So it's time consuming, very time consuming. And not particularly fun to be perfectly honest.
Because I don't know if the board would consider, because I know a lot of times we don't make changes mid-year and some things of that nature, but we have been providing these FOIAs free of charge. But I think in the time that it's taking away from the employees to be doing the jobs that they're supposed to be doing, I think that there needs to be some type of charge for that. And I don't know if the board would consider doing that now, or if you want to wait till next year, or something of that nature. It's the board's decision. We have not charged at all. And so looking at that, I just want to throw that out there to see what the will of the board would be. Do you want to wait till next year? But I think that we should consider strongly, it's in policy that the board strongly consider that we go ahead and charge for some of these FOIAs that are coming in. Because, when you look at that, there are a lot of things that Mr. Smith and Mr. Stepnowski does. Just here recently, there were 3 of us in an office for a day doing nothing with black markers. So it was me and Mr. Smith and Mr. Lee going through documents and making sure that we're not, that it's meeting the FOIA, that anything that is supposed to be redacted, or if we have a question, we put it in this file, or, something of that nature, so it can be. But that was to help Mr. Smith. Usually he does these on his own. And that was the only day I think that really I've helped him, or that Jody has helped him. He takes on all this.
I appreciate having this conversation this evening. I mean, I think that's where we just have to start, because I don't know that sometimes even us as a board realize, although I think we have a good idea now, how much time we're spending as an assistant superintendent working on FOIA requests, and money aside, you're not getting to do the job of the assistant superintendent when you're doing that. So I think, we're not going to solve it right this minute, but long-term, we also really have to be thinking about how will we adjust these FOIA requests moving forward. There really is going to need to be a job for that, because Doug's got all his stuff to be doing. I mean, everybody has stuff that they should be doing for our students, and not spending 15 to 25 hours on this in addition. I would be in favor of some cost to it, but again, the cost isn't really that's not gonna solve the issue, because they're still gonna be spending their time doing the plan.
Well, I think, once you look at that cost, then that person decides if they want to pay that cost or not. So if one looks at this and says, okay, our initial pool on this, we've got X dollars, it could be between this range and this range, that's your decision whether I proceed or not. And I think that is just one thing. I mean, that's what policy does allow.
I agree. I don't think that you guys should be taken away from your job to do this. I could be in favor with contracting an actual FOIA officer, which in the state of Virginia makes on average $53.52 an hour. But then I did want to have some clarification between, for instance, like we mentioned, a parent whose child was involved in an incident at school and wants to come in and watch a video. I do object if we are going to charge a parent to come in and see a video of something happening to their child versus the fishing expeditions we get from the various news outlets and the Democratic Committee and those types of large, humongous FOIAs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. No, they would be able to come in because that would be part of their student record or their student. So they would have an opportunity for that. You also would not charge for someone to make a copy of the student's file. I believe that's actually in code. And that so with the videos and those type of things, if it involves their child, it's really, as you said, it is the fishing through the information and those type of things. Those are the good, fast, easy ones and those type of things. And yes, they would have access to that, and that would not be charged because realistically, that would be part of the student's file.
So the parents who are asking for emails regarding their own child would not be penalized, because my concern is if a parent is looking for emails regarding their child, then it sets up a bias for those of lower incomes who are not then able to access information regarding their child. So obviously, we have a large FOIA for the incident that happened at Nova, and those parents deserve to know what happened in that instance. And if you're a parent who doesn't have an extra $500 laying around, I don't think you should be deprived of information about your child. So can we write that into the fee schedule to differentiate between parent FOIAs and fishing expeditions?
We would have to distinguish between the two. And I'm not sure that I actually have the answer for that, perhaps that specifically how that would be written or set. And would that, I'm sorry, it's on 16.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, don't parents have a separate right under FERPA to review their child's educational record?
They
So
did
that
the
would be separate from
educational,
FOIA.
it would be, I would identify the emails as being separate of a scholastic record.
That's part of you.
And you could ask our attorney.
Yeah.
Andrew, were you able to hear that?
Yeah, so the Freedom of Information Act actually prohibits charging for parents to review their students' education records. As between the interplay of FOIA and FERPA and timelines associated with that, the law is a little bit in flux in Virginia right now, so I don't want to speak to that in an open session, but in terms of the fee concern that's been discussed, certainly the school division may not charge the fee for parents to look at their own children's records.
And emails.
And email, so whatever constitutes the student's scholastic records, and that's fairly broad under FOIA, there can be no charge for those.
Is there a reason that we're not currently following our policy on charging FOIA? It is in there.
Sometimes we've just used the historical perspective of what have you done in the past. And historically, this has been in there. And Mrs. Shepard, Dr. Shepard now, and was with us and prior to my position here. I asked her before she left, and she said our practice has been that we have not charged. So it's been a historical practice rather than any other reason. Perhaps some of the things that Ms. Evans is actually heading on to the cost. Perhaps a cost to one family is much different cost, even though it's the same number to another family and those type of things. And honestly, we historically, from the time that I've been here, we haven't had that volume that we currently have now. I mean, FOIA is pretty much what Doug and I work on for probably the last month and a half.
Do we know any of our surrounding counties, do they have a specialized FOIA person that does their, or maybe they don't get as many
It's
requests?
a combination. I think a lot of times FOIAs themselves come for many different reasons. Sometimes they're increased just by some stimulus or something, whether it may be something in society, whether it may be through conversation, those type of things. Sometimes maybe it's through an event of some sort. I know that the county does charge. I spoke with the county yesterday. They actually have a FOIA person. I believe in Winchester, somehow it's assigned to the HR department. And I'm not advocating that. Mr. Lee's not here today, and I'm not advocating that, but I'm just merely making a statement of what I found here. So I know Mr. Lee is on a recruiting trip, and he may be listening here, or maybe not. I don't want him to drive off the road. But
His wife's sitting back there,
Yeah.
so she's listening.
Yeah, Ms. Lee. Most school divisions actually may have someone who shares this responsibility. I'll throw this out there. I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but I'm thinking I guess I'm sort of kind of advocating for it, okay, through honesty, is that with the communications director can also be your FOIA officer, because that is the communication and so forth with the public. So most of the time in a division such as ours, unless there is a major stimulus in the community for information and so forth, that it is a job that's normally coupled with another job that's similar in its nature, like a communications director.
Thank you.
Any additional comments or questions from Mr. Smith?
Are we, so with the exemptions, which obviously FOIA exemptions are optional and they're not required, but under the one about personal contact information, why are we still including certain people's personal contact information in those FOIA responses?
As far as emails, perhaps is that, or maybe perhaps there's other contact information that you're,
I'm referring to email addresses in this one because that is specifically identified under Section 10 of 2.2-3705.1. It specifically lists email addresses as being one that can be redacted.
Andrew, could you elaborate on that?
So if I heard the question correctly, it's about personal emails and the reference that Mr. Smith mentioned earlier about emails collected as part of a mailing list, for example. There's a Virginia FOIA counsel opinion that analyzed the statute and said because of the way the statute is worded, it really is only for situations like signing up for an email listserv so that people can't get that list of emails and then send out spam alerts. It specifically does not cover if I send an email to the superintendent or to a board member or whomever. That exemption just doesn't cover that specific instance. Because of the way that the statute is worded, there's a requirement that you have to affirmatively opt out of, you have to, I'm sorry, let me pull it up and see what it says. But in short, the FOIA opinion says that just doesn't apply to the one-off emails. It has to be specifically provided as part of a sign-up for mailing list, for example.
So any parent who chooses to email the school principal or a teacher or a board member with a concern about their child, then if somebody FOIA requests that parent's personal email address, which can disclose their name, will then be released, and that's perfectly legal to allow that to be weaponized against
So in that situation, what I think would make sense is to apply the student records exemption to redact the information that could be used to identify the child as part of their student record. Certainly that's a very different situation than someone complaining about something totally different who has no affiliation with the school whatsoever. So that the student record exemption carries a lot of weight in that situation.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I know you do that with us, that you have a huge undertaking with the volume that's come in. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments this evening on this? Heartbeat. Anybody interested in it?